I'm
How's it
assuming that,
looking, Layla?
yeah, it's looking good. I'm assuming there might be maybe one or two folks who might just be popping on. Maybe they're switching gears here, but I feel like we can probably go ahead and get started if you'd like to kick things off, Hillary.
All right, great. Thank you, Layla, for putting this together, and welcome everybody for the City of South Lake Tahoe's first stakeholder workshop for our Reach Code initiative. My name, oh, here's someone there. My name is Hillary Roverud. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of South Lake Tahoe. And joining me is Sarah Letton, who is the city's sustainability coordinator. There she is, waving. Also joined by a consultant team from ID 360 that is assisting us with this effort. Really appreciate your participation today, your expertise and your input is very important as part of this process, and it'll certainly help us as we're exploring options for Reach Code and presenting those to our City Council for consideration. This is an important initiative for our City Council. They have adopted goals for reducing carbon emissions within related to activities within the city. And buildings are one source of carbon emissions. So we're looking at that specifically with this particular initiative. The city, as I mentioned, we've engaged a very experienced consultant team in ID 360. They've assisted many other jurisdictions in going through the process of developing a REACH code. They're very informed and they keep pace with all of the new information coming out from the state level as well as industry standards. So we're grateful to have them assist us and take us through this presentation today. A lot of today is just going to be about introducing this group to the concept of a REACH code, a little bit of educational background there, and then getting some initial input. There are going to be other opportunities for input through the process, as well as some general community workshops where we'll be able to reach out to even broader spectrum of the community. So thanks again for participating today. And Layla, I'll let you introduce your team.
Great. Thank you so much, Hillary. So hi, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for this meeting. As Hillary mentioned, our team at ID 360, we are supporting the city's REACH code development efforts, and we have worked with a number of jurisdictions throughout the state of California in developing and adopting local REACH codes that are, fit in with the community and the needs of council as well. And I'm joined here by our principal in charge of ID 360, Melanie Jacobson, and our one of our associates, Sonam Kaur, on the line as well. And it's just, as Hillary said, it's great to be here at the table, or the virtual table, so to speak, with all of you here today. Really, as Hillary mentioned, just kind of echoing, we're really here today to launch the policy development and adoption efforts for the city's first local new construction REACH code. So we'll get into kind of the details of what that looks like in the presentation today. But before we actually dive in, it'd be great to just kind of do a round table of quick introductions. So if you could possibly share your name, what organization or background brings you here today, that would be great. And for efficiency's sake, I will just run down this list. So once I just call your name or number here, if you could just unmute yourself, say hi, it would just be great to meet you. So why don't we go ahead and just start off with Anne.
Hi, this is Anne Floor Dwyer. I am the principal and architect for EcoSense Designs, Architecture and Planning, and have an office based out of my home in Kirkwood and also in Truckee. So kind of do work all around the lake.
Great. Thanks for being here, Anne. How about Brianna?
Hello, my name is Brianna Kelly. I'm the program manager for the energy efficiency programs at Liberty Utilities. I thought I'd also just note there that I'm also the phone number calling in. My audio is being a little wonky, so
Great.
nice to meet you.
Thanks, Brianna. And how about Brooke?
Hi, my name is Brooke Bertone, and I'm a principal architect. Our firm is called Monarch Architecture here in South Lake Tahoe.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Thank
And
you.
I'll turn it over to Dave. Or maybe we'll come back to Dave if you're trying to unmute yourself. We'll circle back to you, Dave. And I do see we have Jennifer here as well.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Gunther. I'm the Senior Manager of Customer Solutions. I work with Brianna on the energy efficiency programs, and our department also handles the electric vehicle programs and supports the solar installations as well.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And how about Maggie?
Hi, my name is Maggie Levin. I am with Greenfront Mortgage in Lake Tahoe, and I'm also the Local Government Affairs Committee co-chair of the Contractors Association of Truckee and Tahoe.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here.
Mhm.
And I see Dave, I think you're unmuted now if you want to say hi.
Yeah, figure out there's 2 mute spaces. Anyways, I'm David Goldman, architect at Environmental Architecture here in South Lake Tahoe.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Dave. And how about Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Luxinger. I'm a realtor and co-chair also of our local government committee for the South Tahoe Association of Realtors.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt. And how about Prakash?
Hi, I'm Prakash Kasiraj. My wife and I are retired, living full-time here in Salt Lake Tahoe. I'm a board member of the Sierra Nevada Alliance nonprofit group, and I'm very interested in climate change and what we can do to mitigate the effects.
Great. Thanks for being here, Prakash. And lastly, I think I have Zach.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Zach Tanner, owner of TanCon Incorporated GC in South Lake, and I'm chairing as a South Shore Government Affairs Manager.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here, Zach. And did I miss anyone? I don't think I missed anyone, but if I did, please feel free to wave your hand or unmute yourself. But I think we made it through the list. All right. Wonderful. So with that, why don't we go ahead and dive in? But before we begin, just a few things. So the presentation today will be broken up at some points with polling questions, which will launch directly from the Zoom application that we're in and kind of pop up in a separate window on your Zoom app. For folks who are joining by phone, it should still pop out, but if there are any technical difficulties with it, the document that we sent out last week also includes a fillable kind of polling form that you're welcome to also kind of complete after and send our way. But there will be some kind of breaks in the presentation to prompt some questions and get some feedback. The polling questions will be prefaced with some background context slides to really help guide those questions, and then some of the discussion that we get to later today. Everyone will have an opportunity to vote and provide additional written comments as needed. And some open floor discussion is welcome during each polling session. We will keep kind of a tight timeline around it, but anything else that we can't get to will be welcome during the actual kind of open floor discussion later today. And of course, any questions or comments that aren't addressed in today's meeting, we'll follow up with the team separately after that. And then lastly, on this slide that you're seeing, there's a little handy dandy QR code, which you can scan to access after this meeting today, the presentation materials and any supplemental resources. This will actually take you directly to the city's Reach Code development webpage. So with that, we'll get into our agenda for today's meeting. So we're really just going to first set the stage for today's meeting by starting off with the why behind this policy and how it relates to the vision of the city's climate action plan. We'll introduce some key priorities outlined in the CAP that are already directly tied to REACH codes and building decarbonization. And before we present the REACH code policy options and open up the discussion, we'll actually provide just a high level background on REACH codes. From there, we'll dive into an introduction to electrification and efficiency to really lay the foundation of some of the REACH code policy approaches that we'll be reviewing today. And then after that, we'll focus in on the statewide utility REACH code program and the initiatives happening at the state level, and really see how the state efforts actually guide the policies at the local level. Then we'll wrap things up with a quick recap of the REACH code strategy and some considerations discussed during the presentation, and move open to the open floor discussion and just kind of wrap up with some next steps that the city is taking as we move forward in this process. So there's a handful of objectives for today. They're quite bold and include the following. So we'll provide that educational background on energy REACH codes. We'll explore policy pathways and model codes for new buildings in particular. And then we'll get into actually reviewing some of the custom cost effectiveness addendum results that were provided for South Lake Tahoe. All of this will lead to gathering your recommendations and input and responding to any questions or comments during the discussion. And then, of course, we'll end with some next steps. So first, we're going to start off with our first agenda item, which is all about the city's climate action plan. So I think it's safe to assume that, all of us here on this call today have already experienced the impacts of climate change. And climate change is directly impacting South Lake Tahoe, and it has ripple effects that impact residents, the economy, public health, as well as the environment. Now, the Tahoe Basin region has experienced a variety of challenges due to climate change, including some of the items listed here: variable winter snowpack, warming lake temperatures, frequent and intense droughts, and of course, severe wildfires. Now, the severity of all of these experiences led the City Council to adopt the City of South Lake Tahoe's Climate Action Plan. So the Climate Action Plan itself was developed to really strengthen the city's commitment to sustainability and resiliency. And this includes actions like achieving greenhouse gas emission reduction goals through community-wide emission reduction targets, which we'll take a closer look at in upcoming slides, transitioning to 100% renewable energy, providing a more livable, equitable, and economically vibrant community, all while demonstrating the city's commitment to environmental leadership. And of course, building resiliency during climate change induced extreme heat events, wildfires, and other risks that the city is already experiencing. So every climate action plan starts off with an assessment of the city's baseline greenhouse gas inventory to really set the stage of where the city is at and benchmark the path forward. So this slide here is just showing the city's baseline greenhouse gas inventory, which estimated that the community generated around 243,000 metric tons of carbon in 2015. So that's our kind of baseline. And that's what you're seeing here on this little graph. You'll also notice that the emission sources themselves are actually broken down by the sector. So the largest sources are transportation and residential energy and non-residential energy. Both residential and non-residential energy are actually combined in the orange part of this pie graph here under building energy. And that's accounting for 59% of the city's overall emissions. So to really meet the city's 2030 and 2040 emissions reduction targets, transportation and of course, building energy strategies and actions have become priority. So the figure that you're seeing here is showing the city's emission projections all the way through 2050. So under a business as usual scenario with no intervention, emissions rise steadily through 2050, as you can see here from the gray line at the top of this graph. Now, the adjusted business as usual scenario, which accounts for reductions from both federal and state level regulations, are depicted by the blue line on this graph. And it does show a decrease in annual emissions. However, in order to reach the city's more aggressive emissions reduction targets, additional actions that go beyond those implemented at the federal and the state level are required. So, to meet the city's 2030 target, the CAP identifies strategies and actions to reduce those emissions citywide from a variety of emissions factors, like the building energy sector. And the graph here is outlining the city's reduction targets by 2030 as well as 2040. Now, we'd also like to just note that the city has actually committed to an even more ambitious target for their 2030 goal of instead of 50%, it's actually 59.2% reduction from 2018 levels actually by 2030. And this is the new target that is guiding the city's efforts currently. Now, by 2040, the city aims to reduce emissions by 80%. Now, the great news is that the CAP demonstrates that through full implementation of strategies and actions, considerable progress towards achieving these goals, especially the city's 2040 target, can be made, as well as just staying in step with the state's 2045 carbon neutrality goal. So due to those community-wide emissions reduction targets and goals, the CAP includes specific climate action priorities that are directly related to both building electrification and efficiency reach codes. In this slide that we're looking at now, just have a few worth mentioning. So just kind of focusing in on some of the bold items on this slide. Electrification and efficiency reach codes, as well as adopting green building standards, are key strategies to helping the city achieve these goals. Now, the CAP also includes goals around renewable electricity procurement and energy efficiency and electrification strategies for existing buildings as well. However, the primary focus of the city's first local reach code development efforts is really focusing on new construction only. So we've talked about the CAP. Now we're going to get into the second item on our agenda, which is just a background on electrification and efficiency reach codes. So just starting off with some kind of national and statewide context. So, globally, domestically, especially here in California, as we mentioned at the top of this presentation, because of climate change, our communities are experiencing rapidly changing economics and policies related to climate action and implementation. And recent national and state level policies have really shifted the role of government in mitigating the effects of climate change. Now, we don't have time to cover all the climate action related legislation today, but from a federal level, President Biden calling for a government-wide approach to climate change and executive orders issued here in the state of California, like the carbon neutrality by 2045, as well as 100% of in-state sales of new passenger cars and trucks set to be zero emission by 2035. Climate change policy is definitely here to stay. It's also worth noting just a few developments from last year. So the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides federal rebates and tax credits specifically for decarbonization efforts, as well as the California Climate Commitment that was signed last year by Governor Newsom, which is a $54 billion climate legislation plan to basically combat climate change through various ways, but including electrification and efficiency type of reach codes. And then even more so, the California Air Resources Board last year voted to ban the sale of new gas furnaces and water heaters by 2030. So that's definitely coming down the line quickly. Furthermore, also last year, the California Public Utilities Commission voted to eliminate subsidies that incentivize gas lines to new buildings, and that's actually starting on July 1st of this year. Even more, recently, a couple months ago, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District passed a zero emission appliance standard that will actually kick in starting in 2027, which is kind of having an impact on all the other air quality management districts here in the state of California. And we anticipate to kind of see some changes around there. So due to all these evolving regulatory efforts and climate preservation occurring at all these different levels of government, a lot of California jurisdictions are adopting local building reach codes to prepare their communities for the changes ahead. In fact, at the start of this year, 1 in every 5 Americans now lives in an area that has passed some sort of building decarbonization policy. So two of the most common questions that we hear about reach codes are what is it and why implement them? So reach codes themselves are adopted locally, and they will vary by jurisdiction, just because every city is unique and has different needs. But there are some basic fundamentals of reach codes that really remain unchanged, and sometimes differ just depending on the type of reach code. Some on the call today may know that the statewide building code is updated every 3 years. So the 2022 code kicked in on January 1st of this year. And reach codes can be amendments to various parts of the statewide building code, but they tend to primarily focus on the California Energy Code, or Title 24 Part 6, and the California Green Building Code, also known as Cal Green, or Title 24 Part 11. Now, all reach codes are a voluntary code that a jurisdiction locally adopts and mandates, that it, in essence, reaches beyond baseline state requirements. Basically, this just means that the reach code ordinances that are adopted by local governments require something in addition to the requirements of the state's building code. Now, energy reach codes are traditionally based on local building prototypes that are built within California Energy Commission, or CEC approved energy modeling software. And certain energy reach codes will also require cost effectiveness studies that outline modeling assumptions and results, and also will require the approval by the CEC prior to local enforcement. Furthermore, reach codes cannot preempt federal appliance efficiency standards. Now, on the flip side, there are numerous reasons why jurisdictions are exploring and adopting reach codes. Primarily, as we just kind of touched on, reach codes support various policy goals, including climate action plans like South Lake Tahoe's. There are also numerous benefits attributed to reach codes, including savings on energy. Depending on the type of reach code, this can also extend to money saved over time related to operations as well as utility costs. And as noted previously, reach codes can contribute towards efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, really through design that considers efficiency of appliances as well as fuel types. And of course, many cities, just like South Lake Tahoe, have climate action plans that include increasing availability of renewable energy to residents and businesses. So that goal, coupled with electrification, can really push the needle on decarbonization efforts on a local level. So the slide that you're seeing here is just kind of a high level timeline of the typical development to implementation process of reach codes, and also just how it relates to South Lake Tahoe. So I'm going to start from left to right on this timeline. The development efforts really began with direction from council and staff meetings to discuss priorities as well as parameters. So for South Lake Tahoe, this means focusing on new construction first. Soon after this, technical information and analyses provided by the statewide Reach Code program started to be published to support local jurisdictions in their Reach Code development processes. Now, once the cost effectiveness studies rolled out, many jurisdictions began outreach with stakeholders in the community, and even starting to adopt and mandate reach codes for the 2022 code cycle that just kicked in at the top of this year. Now, for South Lake Tahoe, staff plans to host at least one stakeholder meeting, which we're currently in, and one public engagement meeting with the community to gather feedback to inform council at an upcoming council study session or informational session. After that, additional stakeholder and public outreach activities will continue, which will eventually lead to the development of a reach code policy to bring back to council for consideration. Now, once that policy is actually adopted, the REACH code ordinance itself will go through the necessary state agency approval processes and be filed with the Building Standards Commission. And typically, a REACH code ordinance begins to impact building permits 30 days after council approves the second reading, unless a specific date is actually noted in the ordinance. So a big component of REACH codes is building electrification and efficiency. Now, building electrification sometimes can sound complex to folks, but it's pretty simple. It's really just using electric appliances and equipment such as induction cooktops, heat pump water heaters, heat pump heating and air ventilation systems or HVAC systems in our homes and our businesses. Now, electric appliances still perform the same job or service, heating or cooling our homes, providing hot water for our showers, cooking our food, but they are typically more energy efficient than gas counterparts, which can help to provide savings in energy costs down the line. Now, electric appliances have also been found to be better for indoor air quality and our health. For example, switching to electric stoves like an induction stove and cooktop can eliminate invisible pollutants that come from burning natural gas inside the home. Additionally, electric appliances, as I mentioned before, can be powered by clean energy, such as rooftop solar or clean power options if provided by the local utility. Which can include carbon-free or renewable sources. So those paired together, again, can really drive decarbonization efforts on that local scale. So because we're talking about electrification and efficiency REACH codes, it's also really good to understand where California's gas usage stands. So the slide that you're seeing here on the left breaks down residential building gas usage here in California, and then on the right is a snapshot of commercial usage. So for both kind of occupancies, the highest usage is predominantly in water heating and space heating for both residential and non-residential. On the residential side, this is typically followed by cooking, and then if you have a pool, pool heating, and clothes drying. In some non-residential buildings, there are process uses of natural gas, which is identified by the miscellaneous section on this pie graph on the right-hand side. So the proposed REACH code initiative really focuses on residential and non-residential end uses and decarbonizing those specific end uses. So again, space heating, water heating, and even cooking and clothes drying. So this slide here is just kind of showing a snapshot of electrification REACH codes throughout the state of California. So as of March of this year, 76 California jurisdictions had adopted some sort of REACH code for their building permit applications. Now, there's a variety of approaches to these REACH codes. Some of them are actual all-electric whole building REACH codes. Some tackle specific systems of those buildings, such as space heating and water heating. And then there are some that are what is known as electric preferred, where it's maybe asking new mixed fuel buildings to perform better than the California Energy Code by some level. And then there's efficiency REACH codes, which also look at building performance. And of course, electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That's not a part of our discussion today, but many jurisdictions are also in tandem adopting electric vehicle charging requirements that go above the Cal Green Code. And this slide here is really just to highlight some of the REACH code efforts that other cold climate jurisdictions have acted on. So this can range from some of the items that are, kind of called out here, but Crested Butte, Colorado, which is also a kind of small mountain ski town type of town. They do have all electric requirements as well as all electric readiness for single family, multifamily, and commercial buildings, albeit new commercial and new single family, multifamily. Also, similarly, heading towards the East Coast, there are a number of cities who have adopted all electric requirements as well. Some, even like Beacon, New York, have also tackled remodels and existing buildings. And also just kind of calling out a friendly neighbor just across the way, Truckee is also exploring building as well as EV reach codes for both new and existing buildings. So this is really just to kind of highlight that outside of some of the other climate zones in California, there are some other cold climate cities who, get their fair share of snow or really cold weather that are also making moves as it relates to building reach codes. All right, so with that, we're going to jump in to a couple of polling questions. So I'm about to launch the first one for the group here today. I'll give everyone just a few minutes to respond. Each of the polling questions will also have the question kind of listed here. Just for reference, but it should also pop out in your little Zoom application for you to also see there. So really the first question that we just kind of want to gauge with the group is in terms of topics and just kind of education, what do you feel the community could benefit from with additional education as it relates to kind of reach codes and some of the items that we just talked about, heat pump technology, solar PV, induction cooking tends to always be a big one as well. So we'll give everyone just maybe a few minutes to respond to the poll. I'm seeing some results come in. Wonderful. And if anyone has just anything to add or you'd like to share just while people are plugging in their polling results, please feel free to either raise your hand or I think you can unmute yourself as well. Great. I'm seeing. All right. I think. All right. Seeing a couple more folks. All right. I think we have all 9. So I'm going to end our poll. Okay, and I will just quickly share some of these results. So just taking a quick look, it looks like a lot of folks agree heat pump technology is a big educational point to be considered, as well as building electrification. A little less so on the solar PV and energy storage system side, and it does look like some folks have also said kind of education related to induction for both commercial and for residential as well. And let's see if I can. Yep, heat source. There's a couple other ones that folks shared. Heat source reliability, and then doing a cost benefit analysis of how to start getting power lines underground. Well, that's definitely a good one as well. So thank you everyone for participating in that first poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch our second one before we get started with the rest of our presentation. So poll number 2, we just talked about kind of gas usage and some of the building systems. Curious to know and see what everyone's thoughts on building systems that should be a priority for the city to address in respect to greenhouse gas reductions, as well as energy efficiency. So this can really range if you're thinking certain appliances, HVAC systems, hot water systems, which are the, biggest in terms of gas usage, solar PV, and then also we've included insulation, weatherization, EV charging as well. And anything else that you would like to add, you can also plug into the additional comments section. Great, seeing some responses come in. Right, I think just a few more folks are tagging in. All right, I think just a couple more folks. Give everyone another 30 seconds or so. Wonderful. All right, I think we got everyone. All right, I'm going to end this and just take a quick little peek here. Okay, so it looks like insulation, weatherization definitely got a big hit. HVAC systems also kind of second highest there, followed by hot water systems in terms of kind of priority for reduction and efficiency, followed by general appliances, EV charging as well, and nice. Okay, great. I think another one kind of related to alternative materials for roads and as it relates to transportation. So this is all great. Thank you everyone for plugging in your answers. Fantastic. So we just got through the first couple of polls, and now with that, we're going to get on to the next topic for our presentation today, which is all about the statewide REACH code program or initiative. So the statewide REACH code program provides the statewide cost effectiveness studies to support REACH codes. This is all tied and interconnected with the type of REACH code policies that we'll take a look at in some of the upcoming slides. So each report that the statewide REACH code team provides presents measures or measure packages that local jurisdictions can consider adopting to achieve energy savings and emission reductions that go beyond what is being accomplished by just baseline enforcement of the 2022 California Energy Code. So the studies themselves take a look at new construction, including single family and ADUs, non-residential building types, as well as multifamily. The statewide team also does some studies for existing buildings, but that is not the priority of our discussion today. Now, for the new construction studies, all of the general analyses for all climate zones in the state of California, which there are 16 climate zones, have been published at this moment in time. The non-residential cost effectiveness studies that are currently published will be receiving an update at some point just due to some of the energy modeling limitations that the statewide team actually ran into while doing that study. So that's something that they're working on kind of in the background as it relates to non-residential. Now, there's also an electric pool heating and spa analysis study that they are working on, and we expect to see that come at some point this year. And what the statewide team also provides are custom jurisdiction analyses, in particular for cities that might have a local utility that's not that's outside one of the bigger IOUs like PG&E and SDG&E. So for South Lake Tahoe, that custom jurisdiction analysis was performed for all of the new construction studies, which basically included inputting Liberty Utilities and Southwest Gas utility rates into the study to see how that cost effectiveness changed. At this moment in time, we only have the new construction custom study for single family and ADUs, as well as non-residential. The multifamily study is still underway. We have not received that from the statewide team. So as soon as we get our hands on that, we'll make sure that those results and a summary of what that means in terms of reach codes for multifamily are shared with the group here. All right, so we're going to get into the packages from the statewide study and like what those look like in upcoming slides. But first, we'd like to just outline the reach code policy pathways that are actually supported by the cost effectiveness studies. So I have this table here on the slide. There's a lot going on, but I'm going to focus everyone's attention to the top row, which identifies the type of reach code pathway, efficiency, electric preferred, electric only, and electric only plus efficiency. Now, this table highlights also the mechanism for adopting that type of reach code, whether that's an energy code amendment or a green building code amendment, as well as the actual requirement of that type of reach code. And some high level considerations for each approach. So I'm going to move through this table from left to right. So we'll start with the efficiency pathway. So the efficiency pathway is basically a pathway reach code that requires that all new construction exceeds the minimum energy code. So this could mean all electric construction as well as any mixed fuel construction that has natural gas plumbed inside the building. So both of those scenarios under an efficiency type of reach code, those new buildings would have to perform at a higher compliance margin than the statewide California Energy Code. And that would all be shown and verified by that building's energy model or Title 24 report that is always submitted with the building permit application and the building plans. Now, some considerations around this is that it does preserve choice because you can either go all electric or you can choose to do mixed fuel, but you are held to a higher efficiency or enhanced performance standard. Now, right next to it, the second row here is electric preferred. This is also an amendment to the energy code, but it only requires mixed fuel buildings to exceed minimum energy code standards. So in this case, an all electric building wouldn't have to meet any kind of enhanced efficiency standards. But if an owner or a builder decided to have a mixed fuel building with natural gas, that building would be held to a higher performance standard than the statewide energy code. Now, this is really the pathway that we think of when we're talking about kind of traditional energy reach codes. So a couple of code cycles ago, this was really the main type of reach code policy that we would see jurisdictions start to adopt. This does, again, like efficiency, it preserves choice. You're able to kind of choose mixed fuel with that enhanced efficiency, or you can just go all electric. For some jurisdictions, this is seen as a way to incentivize going all electric, especially if a builder does not want to try to go above and beyond the California energy code standards. However, although it preserves choice, based on the cost effectiveness studies, the mixed fuel kind of enhanced efficiency buildings do bring about lower greenhouse gas savings. So that is a consideration for jurisdictions. And then the third column here is the electric only pathway. Pretty simple. It is just requiring that the buildings be designed and constructed as all electric. So no natural gas plumbing installed in the building, unless it meets some type of exemption, which we'll talk about exemptions later in this presentation. There's a couple of different ways that this is being done. The Cal Green is a building code type of amendment. The one that's right next to it is the kind of natural gas moratorium or gas ban. Some folks here on the call today might be aware that just a couple of weeks ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals did appeal Berkeley's natural gas ban for their all-electric building municipal code. So we are definitely watching that really closely to see how this is going to be impacting kind of building reach codes as well as all-electric reach codes kind of moving forward. There's a lot of folks in the industry working to understand exactly what that ruling means right now. There are a number of cities who have adopted a type of gas ban via a health and safety code amendment, like Berkeley, San Luis Obispo, San Francisco as well. And, you know, a lot of jurisdictions are kind of looking in to see what this means. So as more developments of that come to light, the city and staff will be taking that into consideration as it relates to the available reach code kind of policy options. Now on the last end here, it's just electric only plus efficiency. This is basically in this pathway, only all electric buildings would be available as an option, and those electric buildings would have to exceed the California Energy Code standards. So kind of on a scale, this is the most stringent on the spectrum of reach codes. Per the cost effectiveness studies, it is shown to have the biggest impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But there are some caveats in terms of the mechanism for adoption, and it would kind of follow the 3-year building code cycle, and a city would have to renew that every so often, every 3 years. So these 4 pathways will come back into play later in our discussion, and as we start to look at the cost effectiveness packages and the results from those packages. But on a high level, there's really 4 main pathways that are supported by the study. Efficiency, electric preferred, electric only, and then that electric only plus efficiency. So one of the biggest concerns from stakeholders and community members when it comes to electrification and reach codes in general is really around power outages. So backup power and backup heat sources vary, but typically include the common ones listed here. The state building code also has backup power requirements for certain end uses and systems like elevator and platform lifts, exit signs, laboratory suites, ambulatory care facilities, just to kind of name a few. So in terms of backup power and reach codes and how those kind of relate, the statewide reach code team, as well as the CEC, have already stated that emergency backup power and backup heat sources like wood stoves and fireplaces can be allowed by exemption in reach codes, which means a jurisdiction has the authority to include an exemption of that kind within their local reach code ordinance. And many jurisdictions in California, in fact, have actually included these type of exemptions in their own reach codes to really alleviate community as well as stakeholder concern around power outages and grid reliability. So I'm about to launch the 3rd polling question so we can get some kind of feedback and thoughts around this. It should be launching in just a second. So really, we kind of want to hear from the group, you know, if council were to consider requiring all electric new construction for new residential and commercial buildings, what information should be included in those decisions? You know, we just kind of went over some of those high level pathways. In the next slides, we'll be getting into some of the actual exemptions that can be included for consideration. But just from a stakeholder perspective, you know, in addition to kind of any kind of cost effectiveness or anything like that, it'd be great to kind of know your thoughts on what other additional information should be considered. Oh, great. I'm getting some fast responses. Awesome. I think we are just have a few other folks that are still plugging in. Awesome. Give everyone just like 30 or so more seconds. Sweet. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share some of the results. All right, so it looks like, oh wow, there's a big percentage of economic impacts of requirements, cost effectiveness of requirements, which is great. We'll get into some of that in just a few. The effect of requirements on meeting the city's greenhouse gas and efficiency goals. It looks like backup power and backup heat sources definitely should be a priority, as well as impacts from power outages and grid reliability. And great. So I think, yep. Just making sure, didn't miss anything else. Okay, wonderful. So that's great. A number of these things we'll kind of talk about, at least from the cost effectiveness side of things, kind of the results from that and how that relates. And we'll also kind of see some of the greenhouse gas reduction assumptions that are related to some of those packages. And then backup power and backup heat sources. It's great to see just kind of the sentiment from the group as it relates to that type of exemption. So thank you, everyone. All right. So now that we've gotten through that poll, we're going to actually start to dive into couple of the cost effectiveness items. So I kind of mentioned this at the top of the presentation, but all California jurisdictions have the opportunity to adopt REACH codes. REACH codes typically, depending on the type of REACH code, if it's an efficiency type of REACH code, for example, it has to be cost effective for that climate zone. And a measure that is cost effective in one city in a particular climate zone can be a good indicator. It will be cost effective for the entire climate zone, but sometimes that's not the case. South Lake Tahoe, for example, is in climate zone 16. Climate zone 16 has quite a range here in California. It stretches all the way from the top of California, close to the Oregon border, all the way to the bottom of the state, actually including Ojai. In Southern California in that region as well. So when we're looking at the cost effectiveness results, everything is built on the climate zone 16 assumptions in the statewide study. So a quick little overview of the cost effectiveness studies, since the next slides will actually focus on some of the results as it relates to South Lake Tahoe. First, we'll just kind of go over some foundational details related to the studies themselves. So the cost effectiveness studies are actually only required for local amendments to the California Energy Code. So that would be those REACH code pathways that we were just looking at that fall into the efficiency category. This would be buildings that would be required to perform at a certain level above the statewide California Energy Code. So typically, the all-electric only amendment via the Cal Green pathway, because it's not amending the California Energy Code, the Building Standards Commission does not require the same level of cost effectiveness results to be provided, and it does not actually require CEC approval because it's not considered an energy efficiency or conservation type of amendment. Now, in the cost effectiveness studies themselves, there are really two main metrics or methodologies that are used to justify cost effectiveness. And we'll take a closer look at that in the next slide. But the first is called on bill, which is more of the individual consumer perspective and is based on utility rates. And then the second is time dependent value, also known as TDV. This is the more kind of code approach. This is actually the unit that is used in the California Energy Code itself when we're talking about energy efficiency measures. And it's more considered a societal perspective because it really accounts for kind of greenhouse gas emissions and everything that is related to efficiency on that level. Now, jurisdictions basically make the final determination of the metric to use to justify cost effectiveness in the end. So that means that the city would be able to decide whether to go with on-bill or TDV when thinking about cost effectiveness. Now, we mentioned this at the top of the presentation, but a REACH code cannot preempt federal appliance efficiency standards. And once we start getting into it, you'll notice that all of the REACH code packages that are in the cost effectiveness study, they're basically built upon measures. So all of these efficiency measures that the statewide team is looking at are basically assembled into these little packages that actually get evaluated for cost effectiveness. So the two metrics that we just kind of touched on that the jurisdiction can use to determine cost effectiveness are on-bill and TDV. So both on-bill and TDV require estimating and quantifying the energy savings as well as the costs associated with the energy measures that are being looked at. The primary difference between on-bill and TDV is really just how energy is valued. So on-bill is considered the customer perspective and is based on site energy usage and customer utility bill savings. While TDV, or that time-dependent value, which I mentioned, this is the methodology that's actually used by the CEC. It accounts for the cost of providing energy during peak periods. TDV also considers other societal costs, including projected costs for carbon emissions and grid transmission impacts as well. Now, TDV also values energy use differently depending on the fuel source, the time of day, as well as the season. So it really varies on an annual basis. But these are our two metrics or benefits that are outlined in the cost effectiveness studies. So naturally, there are always costs to consider in a cost effectiveness analysis. So in the statewide REACH code analyses, cost assumptions represent the equipment, installation, replacements, and maintenance costs of a proposed measure. And this is relative to the 2022 Title 24 Energy Code requirements or just standard industry practices. Now, the REACH code team for the cost portion, those were obtained from manufacturer distributors, contractors, good old fashioned literature review and online sources such as even like Home Depot and RS Means. Taxes and contractor markups were added as appropriate depending on the measure. And for the single family and the ADU building studies, that was assessed over the life cycle of 30 years for that building, while for non-residential buildings, those costs were assessed over a life cycle of 15 years. So a little bit different in terms of the years that were assessed based on the occupancy type. So the statewide cost effectiveness studies themselves have measures and packages that are kind of built into the results. So the efficiency measures I mentioned are actually assembled into the packages, and then taken together, those packages are either shown as cost effective or not cost effective. In some cases, individual measures themselves might not be cost effective. And we'll take a look at what some of those measures actually were included in some upcoming slides. Now, the studies themselves just looked at maximizing energy savings and greenhouse gas reductions while maintaining a benefit to cost ratio, or a BCR, greater or equal to 1. So if you had some time to peek at the cost effectiveness studies that were shared last week, you may have noticed that these, wonderful but busy tables that outline all the output results from the package assessed by the statewide team had basically these BCR ratios kind of built into it. So each package identified if the BCR for the TDV metric or the on-bill metric was greater or less than 1. If it was 1 or greater for that package, that was considered cost effective. Anything less than that was not considered cost effective. The efficiency measures that were also used are also considered conservative, which means they don't require like major innovations or specialized design in practice. And additional savings will likely actually be possible with the design and equipment selection in reality for that project. And we'll take a look, as I mentioned, at some of those efficiency measures in some upcoming slides. Now, as I mentioned before, the REACH codes just cannot preempt federal appliance standards, so a jurisdiction could not mandate that projects install more efficient equipment than federal appliance standards set at that level. So we're going to now shift into residential new construction. We'll take a look at kind of what was found to be cost effective for residential single family and ADUs. As I mentioned, the multifamily is still forthcoming, so we'll be getting those results hopefully soon from the statewide team. So before we even get into that, just a few highlights to share about the California Energy Code. And some folks on this call might be pretty familiar just based on kind of what you're doing already in the field. But I'm going to focus on kind of what is kind of new and relevant for new construction. So the biggest change for the 2022 California Energy Code is that the CEC has made heat pumps the prescriptive baseline and establishes energy budgets based on heat pumps for both space or water heating, really in an effort to encourage builders to install heat pumps over gas-fueled HVAC units or water heating units. It also means that this is a performance credit in the energy model for all electric design buildings. And what this really is meaning is that, new construction per the energy code can still install gas appliances. But in terms of the energy model that is submitted with the building permit plans, a heat pump is actually setting the project's energy budget for space heating or water heating in certain climate zones, actually within the CEC approved energy model. So typically a performance credit can be given, especially we're seeing that in the residential building stock, if both space heating and water heating for that building is electrified. Now, the state's energy code is kind of being considered electric preferred because of this performance credit. Now, for residential new construction, new residential buildings also now require electric readiness when gas appliances are installed. So again, kind of goes back to that electric preferred kind of sentiment on the code. Higher vent rates for gas stoves has also been included in the California Energy Code. Again, kind of circling back to the indoor health quality aspect of burning natural gas and having that combustion inside our homes or buildings. And also what didn't really get a change was the solar PV installation requirements that carried over from the previous code, but new residential construction is now also subject to energy storage system readiness. So the battery doesn't have to necessarily be installed, but there is a certain level of readiness that has to be included for that new home. So the slide that everyone's seeing here just breaks down the code compliance metrics used for single family buildings. Now there are 3 metrics when we're talking about new residential buildings, and a new residential building has to comply with each metric. And this is typically, again, done in the energy model or the Title 24 report. So there are two EDR ratings, EDR1 and EDR2, which is really similar to what EDR was looked at in the previous code cycle. So in the energy model itself, EDR is basically just the ratio of the TDVs of the proposed design building or what is being constructed, and a reference or standard building that is based on the 2006 IECC home itself. So for EDR, the lower the score, the better. Where a score of actually 0 out of 100 is the equivalent of a 0 net energy building. So EDR1, this is kind of a new metric in the 2022 California Energy Code, and it's based on source energy. It also tracks greenhouse gas emissions and is kind of being called a proxy for greenhouse gas emissions on a whole. EDR2 is based on TDV, and it includes two metrics, efficiency EDR2 and total EDR2. Efficiency EDR2 really is just a culmination of all the efficiency measures that are plugged into that building design, where EDR2 total is all those efficiency measures, as well as PV and any battery storage if the project includes battery storage in its design. Now, when we're talking about the REACH code policy options, in the cost effectiveness analyses themselves, all of the efficiency type of REACH code pathways, all of the requirements for that enhanced efficiency are based on an EDR margin. So that means a new home would have to, meet a compliance margin of, say, 9 EDR in order to, comply with a potential local REACH code. And the focus from the statewide team is on EDR2 efficiency to really encourage better design. And it also allows for some flexibility from a builder's perspective, who can incorporate different types of efficiency measures or systems to try to get that EDR margin, to meet a threshold if the REACH code policy had a threshold. So each of the cost effectiveness studies that we're going to take a little look at is based on building prototypes and are specific to the climate zone itself. So the statewide study for single family looked at 5 all-electric packages and 3 mixed fuel packages. And I'll start with just kind of highlighting the packages themselves first. So starting on the all-electric side of things, the prescriptive or all-electric code minimum package. This is basically a package that meets all of the prescriptive mandatory requirements of the 2022 California Energy Code. The second is the efficiency type of package. This package basically uses only efficiency measures that don't trigger federal preemption issues, including envelope and water heating or duct distribution efficiency measures. Now, the third package that you're seeing here is called the efficiency and NEEA package. This is actually a preempted package. So it does preempt the federal appliance efficiency standards. This package was only evaluated for all electric homes and was really included to just show an alternative design that applies more efficient water heating equipment than federal standards. This was done because the REACH code team found that this is actually more reflective of how builders in the field will actually try to meet any kind of above code requirements in practice. So again, a builder will decide which measures to use to meet those specified energy targets. And we typically see these higher performance NEE tier 2 or tier 3 rated heat pump water heaters actually used in the building design to try to meet that threshold. The fourth all-electric package is efficiency and PV. They basically just took the efficiency package as a starting point. PV capacity was just added to offset most of the estimated electricity use going above the California Energy Code standards. And then the last one, it's pretty, I think on point in terms of what it entails, but efficiency, PV, and battery. This is just basically adding a battery system to the package itself. Now for mixed fuel, some of the packages of the efficiency measures did differ from the all-electric ones, depending on the climate zone, but the same idea still stands in terms of what it was looking at for the mixed fuel buildings. Now, the study itself used certain residential prototypes, including single family, new 1-story and 2-story home, and then an ADU prototype, which was actually new for the 2022 code cycle. So cost effectiveness was evaluated for each of these packages based on the prototypes that you're seeing here for both single family and the ADU. And just to kind of highlight this just a little bit, that preempted package. So again, this was only evaluated for all electric homes. This is not an actual kind of REACH code policy pathway or package that a jurisdiction could actually adopt and mandate. But again, it was just included to really show kind of what is actually being done in the field when it comes to heat pump water heater installation. Heat pump water heaters that are certified to meet NEEA, which is the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, I should say, typically are tier 3 or tier 4. Those are kind of the dominant products on the market today that the REACH code found, the REACH code team found in its analysis. So again, this was really just to show kind of a more reflective package of how builders are kind of meeting these above code requirements for residential new construction in particular. So the table that you're seeing here, this is just showing all of the efficiency measures that were evaluated under this analysis. One of these measures that you're seeing here applied to at least one of the packages that were presented in the report. PV and battery storage systems were also evaluated as noted in some of the packages that we just reviewed. We're not going to go over all the details in this table, but this is directly coming from the cost effectiveness analyses themselves. The study does also outline any incremental cost assumptions for each of these measures. But as you can see here, the measures do range. They do include kind of tighter envelope design through reduced infiltration assumptions, including lower U factors for windows, higher solar heat gain coefficient, especially in climate zones where heating loads actually dominate and are common. Installing cool roofs, which help to combat urban heat island effect, as well as increasing ceiling level insulation, duct insulation, kind of above California Energy Code standards, were also measures that were looked at and included in some of those packages that we just went over. I will say for the slab edge insulation here for climate zone 16, that measure actually did not apply because slab insulation is actually required prescriptively for climate zone 16 projects per the California Energy Code. So this table here is just showing the actual cost-effective and code-compliant results for South Lake Tahoe based on the local utility rates. So the table is broken up by the prototype, the type of package, the method or the metric, so on bill or TDV, and then the level of annual metric ton carbon emissions that are associated on a per home basis for that particular prototype that was analyzed. So all of the single family packages were found to be cost effective based on TDV, so that societal code approach metric. All of the single family packages are also on bill cost effective, with the exception of the mixed fuel efficiency, PV, and battery case, which was not really a surprise due to just kind of costs associated with battery installation at this moment in time. Now, Due to the structure, the rate structure of Liberty Utilities, the statewide team also performed an analysis with permanent resident and non-permanent resident rates, and the cost effectiveness as well as the emission reduction per home were actually found to be the same, but the incremental costs of that actually varied. And if you're interested in taking a look at that, that is in the custom South Lake Tahoe addendum that was shared and can also be accessed on the city's Reach Code webpage. Now, what all of this means is that based on cost effectiveness, as well as code compliance, the city can explore mandating all of the Reach Code pathways that we talked about earlier. So the efficiency Reach Code pathways, looking at mixed fuel buildings only, as well as all electric new construction for residential single family homes. This would be a viable pathway based on cost effectiveness for the city to consider. Now, because the study also looked at ADUs, those results are kind of shown separately. But all the ADU packages were found to be on bill, cost effective, with the exception of the mixed fuel efficiency PV battery case, very similar to the single family. And the all electric efficiency PV battery case under permanent resident rates were also not found to be cost effective. So again, based on the local cost effectiveness results, the city could potentially include ADUs in a Reach Code policy. Again, whether that is just looking at mixed fuel, requiring all electric homes, just based on the custom results, there are methods and metrics that the city can utilize to really justify that cost effectiveness for single family as well as ADUs. So for all of those potential Reach Code pathways, there are some exemptions that the city can consider. So we've talked about emergency backup power and backup heat sources, but also common that we see are residential building projects that may have already received approved planning entitlement before the effective date of an ordinance. Typically, when combustion equipment is allowed, electric readiness is going to be required, and that's already required at the state level for residential. Sometimes jurisdictions will exempt detached new ADUs or JADUs. And then there's some other exemptions that could also come into play, whether that is by appliance type, such as, the cooking appliance. And typical for Reach codes is to include some level of an infeasibility exemption, in particular when a building can't meet compliance with the California Energy Code. And can't demonstrate compliance via the energy model. That is one of those technical and feasibility exemptions that are typically included in any Reach Code policy. So I'm going to launch this next poll. I know there was a lot of information thrown at you in relation to the cost effectiveness study, but one of the things we just want to kind of get a gauge on is, in particular for new residential construction, what's before you here is kind of a ranking question. So if we're considering a Reach Code policy pathway, in your opinion, based on just the packages and also just the pathways that we just went over, what do you think the city should prioritize? So there's some details there on kind of a refresher of what each of these mean, but there's really only 4 pathways in terms of a new construction Reach Code policy. All electric, which is all new construction, is electric only. Electric preferred, which would only be mixed fuel buildings exceeding kind of minimum California Energy Code standards. Efficiency pathway, and that's all construction would have to go above an efficiency standard. And then on the far end, number 4 is really the most stringent and would be requiring an electric building to go above and beyond the California Energy Code. Awesome. I'm seeing some rankings coming through. All right, I think there's just a few more folks who might be filling out their poll. And some may be no priority. In your opinion, lowest priority, top priority would be obviously the one that receives a thumbs up from you. All right. I'll leave the poll open for about another 40 seconds. Seeing some additional items come through. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. All right. All right. Give it about another 10 seconds. All right. Okay, I'm going to end the poll for now. All right, and I think the results should be sharing here. Let's see. Okay, looks like top priority, efficiency pathway. All right, and I'm seeing, okay, no prior, least favorable electric only plus efficiency. Electric preferred also looks like has a lower priority, but for some, okay, great. And electric only, no priority. It looks like the efficiency pathway. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. So with that, we're going to move on just to non-residential new construction here, and we'll just kind of talk through some of those results and just get into some of those details. So the heat pump item that I mentioned, the prescriptive baseline, that also applies for non-residential new construction itself. I think the two biggest changes for non-residential new construction under the energy code that came into effect this year was requirements of solar PV, as well as requirements for battery storage system to actually be installed depending on the building type. Now, similarly to residential, non-residential has its own metrics where a building has to comply with all three of the metrics. But in this case, we're talking about TDV. There's TDV efficiency, which takes a look at the building's efficiency measures that are included in the design, and then TDV total, which is all of those efficiency measures plus PV plus battery storage used to combine. So in terms of the REACH code policy options, for any type of efficiency type of REACH code, so like, for example, a mixed fuel building that might have to go above and beyond the California Energy Code requirements, those requirements are based on a compliance margin or a TDV percentage that the building would have to perform better than. Now, the statewide REACH code team really focused on efficiency and load flexibility to help improve cost effectiveness of some of the packages that we're about to take a look at. So the prototypes themselves are actually coming from the Department of Energy and are basically the four that you're seeing here on the screen. So there's 4 building types that were used in the analysis. The first is medium office building. The second was a medium retail building. The third is a quick service restaurant. And then the fourth was a small hotel package. And the selection of these 4 building types for the analysis really came based on priority and suggestions from some California cities that the statewide team kind of used in terms of feedback for detailing these prototypes. So The results that we're about to see are all related to the prototypes that you're seeing listed here. Now, just like residential, there were packages for non-residential that were explored in the analysis. There were 4 for all electric, and then just 1 for mixed fuel. Now, these are pretty similar to the residential ones, but for mixed fuel and efficiency, that was basically just a mixed fuel building that was built to the California Energy Code and then included additional energy efficiency measures layered in there. On the all electric side, code minimum or prescriptive is just an all electric building that's designed to meet the California Energy Code minimum efficiency standards. The next level is efficiency, and that is an all electric building with added efficiency measures related to HVAC, storage, hot water, heating, lighting, or envelope, depending on the prototype. And then efficiency and load flexibility. This was done for an all-electric building that had added energy efficiency measures as well as load flexibility measures. And this was done in particular for the quick service restaurant. Now, the last one is efficiency plus solar PV, which is basically the all electric building had added efficiency measures and additional solar PV, which just meant that the PV size was sized to be larger than the prescriptive requirements in the California Energy Code. It also accounted for roof space availability based on the prototype itself. Now, load flexibility was also included, as I mentioned, for one of the packages, or 2 of the packages, I should say. For medium office, they looked at using a smart thermostat and also demand response lighting technology. And then for the quick service restaurant, there were a couple scenarios analyzed. So one was an all electric package where the cooking was electrified, and then one was an all electric package with gas cooking. So that would be in line with having a REACH code that exempts commercial cooking, for example, in a new building. So the efficiency measures for non-residential are also listed here. More details for it are actually also in the cost effectiveness analysis itself, but the next couple of slides will just highlight some of these efficiency measures. So, the statewide team kind of started with a potential list of efficiency measures and kind of narrowed them in from there. Some of the measures were specific to the envelope. So using cool roofing on the medium office building, for example, for higher reflectance and emittance values, again, for that kind of urban heat island effect, efficient vertical fenestration, so lower U factors and solar heat gain coefficients for windows was included for 3 of the building types, medium office, retail, and small hotel. The medium office building itself, they also did some efficiency measures around limiting the amount of fenestration as a function of like orientation. So kind of limiting east facing and west facing windows. And then there were other measures actually related to mechanical equipment that were also looked at. So this included water efficiency, fixtures for the kitchen, commercial dishwashers as well, kind of going above like Energy Star standards. At that level, dishwasher heat recovery functions were also explored as an efficiency measure for like the quick service restaurant, as well as reducing hot water load from water efficient fixtures to really allow for a heat pump water heater to operate without an electric resistance backup, for example. And then they also looked at laundry systems as it relates to water. So an ozone system was actually added to large on-premise washing machines for the small hotel. And that really was added to help clean fabrics by chemically reacting with soils in cold water, to help save on energy costs by reducing hot water usage, and then also just reducing the cycle time for those laundry systems. So those were some of the efficiency measures kind of related to the mechanical equipment and water. Also, like residential, the statewide team looked at efficient hot water distribution measures to reduce pipe heat loss. Demand control ventilation for the quick service restaurant was also expanded as an efficiency measure. And then for the small hotel, there was some guest room ventilation efficiency measures that were included, including control requirements that shut off ventilation, I believe within 5 minutes of occupants leaving a room, changing the cooling set point and the heating set point as well. So again, that kind of flexibility, load flexibility, demand response type of measures that were included. So this table right here is just showing what was cost effective and code compliant. So if you took a look at the results of the custom study, you'll have noticed that there were, definitely a lot more packages that were found to be cost effective. But we decided to really just highlight the packages that were cost effective as well as code compliant, meaning that the actual building met the California Energy Code standards in the kind of Title 24 energy modeling perspective. So the results on a whole support REACH code adoption for efficiency measures when added to the mixed fuel baseline for all prototypes except for the medium retail, prototype. So this means that, the city could adopt an electric preferred type of REACH code, having that enhanced efficiency for mixed fuel buildings. So they would be subject to higher performance requirements. And then for the medium office, the team did identify on-bill kind of cost effectiveness packages for the all-electric package with efficiency and load flexibility. It just was not actually found to be code compliant in certain scenarios. But what was found to be cost effective and code compliant was the all-electric efficiency package itself. For a quick service restaurant, all electric, that includes the natural gas cooking. So that would be kind of an exempted type of end use. That also includes efficiency and load flexibility. That was actually shown to be on bill cost effective in South Lake Tahoe based on the utility rates. And then for small hotel, what was found to be cost effective and code compliant was having a mixed fuel small hotel or a mixed fuel hotel building that went above and beyond the California Energy Code requirements. And that was actually found to be cost effective both on bill and TDV for that particular package. You also notice that the emission reductions kind of varied depending on the measures that were included here on this table. But again, we're looking at those packages that were shown to be cost effective as well as code compliant. Now, just like residential, this slide's just showing some of the exemptions that can be included for non-residential new construction, emergency backup power, commercial kitchens that are located in a place of public accommodation. This is pretty common in most jurisdictions' REACH codes that we see today. Sometimes jurisdictions will exempt hotels or motels that have a certain guest room threshold and allow them to actually use fuel gas in on-site commercial clothes drying equipment. So again, a special end use scenario. And of course, when exempted, electric readiness would be required. And there are other exemptions that can be considered, whether that's occupancy type, appliance type even, and then technical infeasibility is always, as I mentioned, a common exemption that would be included in a REACH code. So the question that's about to launch here, very similar to the residential question that we just went through, but just really looking at commercial new construction. If you could just take the next minute or two to just kind of rank from your perspective, a REACH code policy pathway for commercial new construction that should be prioritized. Thank you. I'm seeing some results come in. Okay. All right, I'm seeing some results come in. All right, thank you. Just a few more people, I believe. All right, I'll give everyone about maybe another 30, 40 seconds. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay. I'm gonna end the poll in just a few. All right. Okay, starting to see this slow down. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so it looks like in terms of priority, efficiency pathway, all right, not so much priority for electric only, but some priority for the electric preferred pathway. All right, so thank you everyone for completing that. And it looks like no priority, lowest priority for the most stringent one. Great. All right, so last question for you in this realm before we start to get to the kind of open floor discussion. If the city were to do a phased approach for reach codes, if you could just take a moment to kind of rank your priority in terms of building category that maybe should be prioritized. So we weren't able to go over the multifamily results, so that's kind of, unknown at this point in terms of cost effectiveness. But, in terms of a priority for building categories, from your perspective, should it be a focus on residential as a first reach code, single family ADUs, or commercial buildings, or maybe both? Great. I'm seeing some quick answers coming in. All right. I'll leave this polling question open for another 30, 40 seconds. Looks like, okay, so far, seeing single family priority. All right, give everyone about 20 more seconds. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I'll just quickly throw some results here. So it looks like, all right, kind of similar across the board. But it does look like top priority residential. Looks like there's some votes for both commercial, kind of split on multifamily, but that may change once we get some of those actual results from the statewide team. So thank you everyone for sharing that. And we'll move into, before we open up the discussion, just going to do kind of a quick little recap on just some of the considerations as we kind of talk about these reach code policies. So, you know, adoption approach, as we saw, can vary. There's really those four main kind of reach code policy pathways, whether it's an all electric reach code, an efficiency type of reach code, only requiring mixed fuel buildings to go higher. And then there, we can also look at, you know, whole building in terms of new construction, specific appliances, whether that's an exemption for a specific appliance like commercial cooking, for example, or just even electrifying kind of specific end uses. For the purpose of the reach code policy, some of these pathways, you know, are really aimed at whole building reach codes. Now, also just kind of building types to be impacted. You know, we're talking about new construction only, so no existing buildings, but ranging from residential to non-residential. Exemptions for certain types of end uses. One that I didn't mention earlier on the non-residential side that can be common depending on a building makeup of a city is exempting end uses, process uses for laboratory, medical, and industrial processes in particular. Backup power, again, really key for a lot of communities, as well as backup heat sources, especially, and we see that a lot in some of those colder climate reach codes that are being explored. And then also, you know, incentives and rebates, whether that's for the contractor or for the owner, the builder, to put in more efficient equipment, heat pump water heaters, for example, heat pump space heaters. And then workforce development is also a big kind of consideration around reach codes, you know, making sure that there is the labor force and the contractors out there who can actually install these systems and, you know, have that knowledge and education to make that happen in the field. So we're going to move into kind of opening up the floor for discussion. But one of the things that we do want to kind of launch with you here in terms of kind of incentives and just getting a feel for is, let me stop sharing this here. In terms of incentives, you know, if the city or utility were able to provide incentives, you know, what type of incentives do you feel would be the most valuable to achieve these type of building electrification or efficiency goals? And I know we have some Liberty utility folks, you know, here at the stakeholder group table, and I know they can probably speak to some of the incentives and things that they have going on that are offered to the community, but you know, whether that's grants and or rebates for property owners, cash incentives for installation, expedited plan review has also come up before, or any others that you might think of here. And of course, if you think of anything after, we'd love to get those comments from you as well to be incorporated. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm seeing answers come in quickly. Thank you. All right. Leave this open for 30-ish more seconds. Seeing a couple other responses coming through. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and send this guy here. All right, and just a quick okay, wonderful. So looks like grants and rebates for property owners, definitely cash incentives for contractors who are installing these. Couple of votes for expedited plan review as well. And okay, this is great. And wonderful. I think I'm seeing some comments from Liberty. Liberty does currently offer incentives for commercial customers, both new construction and retrofits. And on the residential side, Liberty also has a weatherization and appliance upgrade program, statewide run for income qualified residential customers. And this would be for existing, however. So looks like there are some incentives out there, at least for the community. All right. And so with that, I'm going to throw this polling question up here, but we're really just going to open up the floor now for kind of open discussion, kind of questions or any just thoughts that you may have had come up. You can take the time to also write in some answers on the poll that was just launched. This is really just kind of a catch-all, just kind of based on your industry knowledge and expertise. Anything else that you might want the city to know or be considering as it relates to buildings, greenhouse gas emissions, or energy usage on a whole level. But feel free to, type in any answers, but we'd really like to take this time to just kind of open up the floor with all of you here now. If you want to raise your hand to say something, please feel free to. But I'm going to kind of open up the floor now for any other kind of discussion items, questions, comments, or thoughts from the group. Trying to see if I see any hands raised. I don't see any hands raised. I do see, I think, Dave, were you trying to add something to the group? I see you're unmuted, but just wanted to double check.
No, I'm muted
Okay.
on my microphone.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Since we don't have anyone raising their hand yet, maybe I'll just throw something out there and see if anyone would like to respond. On that last poll there, I was kind of surprised to see grants and rebates selected over cash or expedited plan review. If kind of surprised considering we're talking just new construction. So I just wondered if anybody would be willing to comment further on that.
Well, I will say the plan review in the city right now is pretty good compared to everybody else around the basin. There have been times where the city's been really slow and then expedited plan review would help. But right now, it's not really an issue. And I think that's why we didn't check that.
Thank you, Dave.
I have a comment or a question. We're talking about new housing because that's probably the easiest path. But for the biggest impact, is there any thinking about incentives or support for existing homes? Because that's our biggest issue, so existing buildings, not new buildings. So what is the thinking on that?
And Hillary can chime in. I think our thought here was let's try this new buildings path first and see how it goes over in the community, and then we'll look to an existing buildings reach code process. It's top of mind for sure.
Right. Are there
Yeah.
some incentives or funding from the federal government for this, for retrofitting existing buildings?
Certainly there's like heat pump incentives that are offered by the feds, solar, and that's all, yeah, that's all accessible to, I think new or existing. I don't think yeah, it can go either way on that. Hillary, you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add on the first question. We definitely recognize that the existing built environment has a significant impact that does need to be addressed. This is the city's first go at adopting construction standards with respect to energy efficiency that might go beyond the California Building Code. So we are looking at new construction with this kind of initial conversation. I certainly would envision that that's going to evolve to include retrofits on existing construction. We see that often in the state building code cycles as well. They'll kind of initially set forth requirements for new construction, and then gradually those requirements will also roll into remodels, things like that. So I do see that in our future. We're currently in this kind of first round focused on that and that on the new construction. I think that's pretty typical with other jurisdictions. You know, we also want to make sure that we're providing a lot of opportunity for education of our local kind of building communities. We want to make sure that our local builders are able to kind of participate and, you know, able to be part of our kind of construction future down the road. So by taking it a little bit in the baby steps, we're hoping that we can kind of build that education and then have a much easier route when it comes to tackling the existing buildings.
Yes, and I can also add just like to the incentives and rebates, we will definitely will be seeing that come down the line, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act that is starting and expected to kind of start rolling out in terms of supporting zero net energy, reach codes, decarbonization efforts for local governments actually later this fall. So there's definitely going to be kind of support and room around that. And then just in general, California has some pretty good incentive programs, you know, not only through the utility, but Tech Clean California also does provide some incentives and rebates directly to contractors and homeowners when it comes to installing heat pump water heaters and just kind of electrifying existing homes as well. There's the build program. So yeah, there's definitely some avenues out there. And I think as a part of our kind of next stakeholder meeting, looking at meeting number 2, we'll likely have some more detailed conversations and discussions around, what's available now, what's maybe coming down the pipeline to support not just new construction, but just kind of electrification and efficiency in the existing building stock as well.
Yeah, I wonder if Jennifer or Brianna, I want to double check on that program you just named, the tech program. Is that available in Liberty territory?
Hi, this is Jennifer. I'm not aware of that. I actually just took a note. It's not offered through our utility, but if it is, that was actually something, Sarah, I wanted to follow up with you on. Any rebates or grants would be neat to offer a complete package. Because I'm sure the city and Liberty can only go so far. And then, if we add in the IRA, if we can work towards making a rebate, kind of a whole rebate, that would be great.
I'd love to work on that with you. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can incorporate clean tech. I was going to do a little research on that.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is Melanie Jacobson. I also wanted to piggyback on that just to mention that Rewiring America has a really great calculator online that will show all incentives and rebates at a federal level that can support these efforts for voluntary efforts. So we can include that in the notes.
Awesome.
Yes. Great.
This is Matt Luxinger. A quick question. With regard to the Sugar Pine Village that's in development, was there any level of what we talked about today as part of those plans as it's being constructed?
Sure, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I can speak to that. The Sugar Pine Village project is all electric. That's something that, you know, they're getting a lot of state funding as part of that project. And so that made their project more competitive in being able to get that funding. So it's all electric, it's modular units. The first phase of those units are all constructed and just waiting to be trucked up here and start that project going this summer.
So as we've kind of touched on, you know, backup sources of power, what's the plan then for Sugar Pine Village?
So they currently do have a generator backup designed as part of their project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you for those comments. Any other questions or comments out there, or Sarah or Hillary, if you had any other questions that you wanted to prompt to the group?
I've got a question, maybe for some of the designers or maybe Matt as well. What's kind of the sentiment with clients? Are you hearing more interest from clients in living in more energy efficient homes or commercial space, you know, utilizing commercial spaces that have kind of a higher level of efficiency in them? What are you guys hearing from your folks you're working with?
Okay, I'll jump in on this one then. My clients in general have always come to me for the, you know, energy efficiency and that. What I have noticed over the last year or so is a big interest in going electric, you know, the whole heat pump and how well that works. That's been huge just over the last year.
This is Matt. I mean, I would agree, just, you know, from the perspective of you know, people looking at properties. Yeah, you know, the more efficient, the better. And they certainly ask those questions. You know, we're a little bit of a satellite economy when it comes to housing from, you know, the Bay Area. And I think if you look at what the 76 entities that had entered a climate agreement, you know, it looks like about 70 of them are from the Bay Area. So that pretty much is where our market is.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Just curious.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Dave, for those comments. Any other last questions, comments, or thoughts? Thank you all for bearing with us to the end. I know we just threw a lot of information at you, but this is really great to just get some of these polling feedback and some of these comments here from the group.
Just to kind of wrap up, Layla mentioned at the beginning that all the materials related to this workshop and the presentation will be uploaded to our city website we have for the Reach Code initiative. So if you have other colleagues that are interested or any information you want to go back and revisit, there's also links to some of the state resources that are available. If you have any questions, please feel free to call myself or Sarah, and we can help get information out to the community. We appreciate your time.
Yes.
I'll just add to that we're going to be hosting this community members meeting next. And so if and just help spread the word on that when we get the date out. It'll be the more the merrier, the more input we can get, the better.
Definitely. And our team will be sending out, just the materials from today. Again, any other questions or kind of comments that might have come out after, all of this settles in your brain, please feel free, as Hillary mentioned, to either send it over to Hillary or Sarah, or you can send it out to our team as well. And we'll make sure that those get recorded, for just future consideration as we continue to move forward. As I mentioned earlier, as soon as we get the 2022 new multifamily custom addendum from the statewide reach code team, we'll make sure that those results and the summary of what that means in terms of a reach code policy pathway is shared with the team. And then as we get closer and look ahead to stakeholder meeting number 2 and the focus areas that will kind of evolve based on the council study session and or any kind of potential items related to the cost effectiveness studies that will help to shape our second meeting together moving forward. But with that, thank you everyone for your time and participation today. It was really great to get some of those polling questions going, and we're just really appreciative of you joining us here today and look forward to the next meeting together.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.